Agri Group and serves as an executive strategy advisor for agriculture across Africa, focusing on special projects that drive transformation. He brings a wealth of experience in strategic visioning, policy engagement, public-private partnerships, and innovation in the agricultural sector. With a proven track record in shaping long-term agriculture strategies, Thabo advises governments, institutions, and development partners to align national master plans with sustainable, future-focused solutions. He champions cutting-edge innovation, research and development, collaborations, and knowledge transfer initiatives to empower farmers and communities. Thabo is also deeply committed to mobilizing investment, promoting value chain integration, and representing Africa in global dialogues. As a
sustainability, social equity, and human well-being over traditional metrics like GDP and profit. It encompasses the circular economy, sharing economy, social economy, green economy, and post-scarcity economy. This new economy aims to address global challenges such as climate change, inequality, and social injustice by fostering innovation and entrepreneurship, encouraging sustainable consumption and production, promoting social and environmental responsibility, redesigning economic systems and policies, and empowering marginalized communities. Our strategy focuses on 4 key areas. 1. Build people. Develop human capital through education, skills training, and healthcare. Empower individuals to reach their full potential and foster a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. 2. Build spaces and infrastructure. Develop modern and efficient transportation systems. Invest in renewable energy, water management, and sanitation. Build sustainable and resilient infrastructure to support economic growth. 3. Build businesses. Encourage entrepreneurship and innovation. Support small and medium-sized enterprises, and foster a business-friendly environment with policies and regulations that promote growth. 4. Create new local economies. Develop local economies through cluster development and industrial parks. Encourage local production and consumption, and foster regional trade and economic integration. By focusing on these 4 areas, the new economy can create a vibrant and sustainable economy that benefits all citizens. It's a holistic approach that addresses the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of nation building. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Greetings once again to the body of Christ. And just want to thank Pastor Shailen for inviting me to be part of the School of Succession. After lots of conversation, meetings, sitting at the airport and over coffee, he's such a very patient father that really pursues, and it's really such an honor. And I came with my wife, and Thabo saying Mahlobo, she's right over there. We've been married for close to 15 years. I just thought I'd share that, which is very important as part of succession, which is one of the most critical things. That if ever you forget everything that I will say today, just don't forget that I have a family and that I prioritize my family and I value it, and it's one of the most important things that we need in Africa, people that will honor this institution of marriage and prioritize it. Very important. And so while I wait for the slides to come up, during our preparation for the School of Succession, my wife and I were in the kitchen, and obviously I was there keeping her company as she was preparing the meal. Having those short conversations as chopping, the basil and all the other stuff, and smelling good, and just encouraging her, being a good husband, encouraging her to make sure that we've got a meal. And that's what good husbands do. And one of the conversations that sparked up was that, are we preparing our children for a future that no longer exists? Now, obviously, one of the things that sparked up that conversation was that we started talking about, career, started talking about school. Most of our children, 3 of our children, we homeschool them, never been in a school. Firstborn is 13, and the second one is 11. The other one is 9. And they've all been studying at home. And so as we're going through conversation around assessments and report, but the honest truth of the matter, we started asking ourselves, is this education preparing our children for a future that exists or that no longer exists? And so when I was a youngster studying in Newcastle, where I grew up, I studied economics. And in economics, one of the things that we learned in economics and in business economics was what most of probably you will know was the circular flow diagram with the factors of production. And in there was what we call the 4 factors of production. I know that Pastor Gary, will know this. It was labor. It was, what else? Land and buildings. And it was capital. And then entrepreneurship. And our teachers used to drill the fact that we need to study so hard so that we can participate as which factor of production? Labor. And this is the education that we received for most of us, that we need to work so hard, even from homes, our parents, from a church, from everywhere. We were taught that we need to work so hard so that we can get better job, so that we could be better people and all that. And this was a message. But the truth of the matter is that we were being positioned into a labor market. And for years, many years, most of us believed that there was just one market to participate in, which is the labor market. And that's why even government, when they start talking or when they start making promises, they say, we will create so many jobs. And over and over again, as they make those promises, and those promises, they are not able to fulfill them because the labor market is saturated. And so every year, lots of graduates exit the university. And they exit believing that the promise that was made from when they started at school will now be fulfilled. And to their disappointment, there aren't jobs because that market is saturated. In fact, even worse now, where you hear that companies are closing down, which means that the one that had the jobs, they are losing them. And now, if you are sitting here, either as a parent or either as anybody, these are the questions that you have to ask yourself. That, do we really want to keep on preparing our children for this? Let's bring it back now home to Gen Z. As we are here at the school, are we still preparing the next generation for this future that actually we know that will no longer exist? And these are very, very important questions that we obviously have to look at. Now, to transition my message, I would like us that we read Zechariah chapter number 1, verse 18 to 21. If you can put it up on the screen, that'll be so good, so great that we read it together, because I believe that it's so important. The guys are doing very well there at the top. I just want to honor you. You're doing amazing work. This is what we need in this generation. Very excellent stuff. Now, in Zechariah chapter number 1, from verse 17. The context of the story there in Zechariah, while they're opening that, is that here's a vision that Zechariah sees of the 4 horns. And these horns, it's an analogy of the powers that be that were terrorizing and making sure that Israel and the house of Judah were not actually able to lift up their head, which could represent so many things, and that they were totally terrified by that. But then another vision comes of the 4 carpenters. Thank you very much. Yes. Then I said, what come these to do? And he spake. Let's start on verse 18. Yes, thank you very much. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, behold, 4 horns. Verse 19. And I said to the angel that talked with me, what be these? And he answered me, these are the horns which have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. And the Lord showed me the 4 carpenters. And then said I, what come these to do? And he spake, saying, these are the horns which have scattered Judah, so that no man did lift up his head. But these have come to fray them. The other version says, they've come to scatter them, to cast out the horns of the Gentile, which lifted up their horn over the land of Judah, to scatter it. Now, why did I bring up this? You can transition back to the slides. Now, why did I bring up this? And it's something that, was spoken earlier, is that if you look at our continent, Africa, if you look at just even our nation from South Africa, our continent, part of my work and my role is to move around the continent and begin to work with some of the communities, some of the countries, in terms of how can we rethink economics? How can we look into agriculture as one of the strengths for Africa and start repurposing the economy of those areas? Recently we were in Kenya and also we went to Ghana. And while we were there in Ghana, you could see that the area is a port, of Africa in terms of things coming in and out. But the food is very high, expensive over there, if I'm permitted to use the word expensive. And if you go to Kenya, it is the same thing. And also Ethiopia, where I also spend most of the time in the East, you realize that Ethiopia, in fact, they say it has become the most expensive country to live in Africa. It is number 1. And so what does that tell you? What does that mean? And if you then go around even in the other countries, I spend also most of the time in Namibia. If you look also within the agri, most of their fresh produce and everything is imported from South Africa, and it becomes much higher when it's over there. But the moral of it is that all of this tells you that there is something within our continent. It's not that it lacks potential. It doesn't have potential. There is something that we need to start looking at it. We need to start realizing that something has to be done. And one of that thing that I realized was that there is such a need for architects, reformers, and nation builders in our continent who will view farming more than just as farming, but who can view it as one of the strengths of the continent that can be utilized to change the whole trajectory of this nation. And so, which means that if we now have to start preparing our generation in terms of how can they reform this continent, we need to now start rethinking our education. So instead of just teaching our children about working so hard to get jobs, we start teaching them about how they could participate in the other markets. And this what pushed me into agriculture, because I realized that I was taught to go get a job. And when the job failed, then my whole life failed. When the truth of the matter is that there was still a whole lot of land in Africa, a whole lot of land just in South Africa, which was not being cultivated, which was not being worked. And that showed me that God has given us the land. In Psalms 24, the Bible says, the earth is the Lord and everything that is in it, and everyone in it. So which means that God has basically created land which is full. It says the earth is the Lord and all its fullness, which means the earth is full. But if it's not cultivated, it's going to remain like it's like that. And so in Africa, you've got 60% of land that actually is not cultivated. That's arable, that's not cultivated. And we are importing to over 60 billion of US dollars in terms of food in this continent. And this is a continent that is a food basket of the nation. This is a continent that prophetically God positioned it in the scriptures as one of the storehouses that fed the nations during times of famine in Joseph's time. But it has lost its prophetic destiny and went into other things. And now we're importing a lot of food. When I go to the shop, I'm one of those stubborn ones, if you were to use the word. I want to see where is this coming from. I went there, I was looking for ox liver, and then when I took it and I realized it's written Australia, and I said, don't you have livestock in this country and that they have to do this to us? And if you look at chicken, don't we have chicken? And that this has to be like this. But then I realized that because we're not participating in that space of that market, so people are doing their own decision and all rules, and it is becoming a problem. And so we needed to go in and participate. And apart from just land and that part of agri, we're not participating in the capital market. And if you look at how we were taught factors of production back then they will say it's buildings and it's all machinery and other things. But that has totally changed. When you now talk capital, now it involves so much. There's capital markets. There is so much that is involved there that we are not participating. If you ask here in this building who has a business that actually is a finance business, you will realize that it's either one or nobody, because it's a space that we are not participating in. And it is a market that has got so much, that there's so much exchange that is happening. And as long as it's like that, whoever controls the flow of capital determines the culture of the community. And that's why you find that there is so much of challenges that are happening. The entrepreneurship side as a factor of production, there's been such a vacuum there, because if you look at just entrepreneurs coming up just in our nation, in our country, in the different space, they've been very less. For many reasons that they are not supported, for many reasons that it's not part of a culture to actually do that, because we are trained on the other way. This I'm bringing to say, this conversation bothered us as a family, me and my wife. They bothered us to begin to say, are we going to package our kids and send them to a school knowing the curriculum they are studying, knowing it very well, and knowing who's teaching them? Some of them we know them. Some of them, they pass through some of our hands, and we know them, that their values are offside. We know who are teaching them. And We know the curriculum, and we know that the system is preparing them just to exit and tick and say they're done. I said, do we want to take that risk? And we had to sit down and say, we will not take that risk. We're going to be different. We're going to begin something that's new, because we're not just prepping them for a job, but we're prepping them to be the next generation of key influencers. And that is why the people that are here, they are the next generation of key influencers. Some of them already, they are showing the signs. Some of them are already walking in that, but they need that as parents, we have the capacity to be able to channel them into those directions. And that's why I believe that today is so key that we do that. And so I believe that to deal with those challenges that I've explained to you, it might not be the four horns like Zechariah saw them, but I think you get it, that there are challenges in this continent. Either be politically, either be religious, either be economically, either be infrastructure-wise, and we need people that will really be architects who will begin to create new pathways in this continent and begin to use the wisdom to really build people that are nation builders. And that's what we need. And that's what we want to come out of these meetings, that we have people that will go and say, we will change the society, we will change this. And I then began to start looking at what we call social innovation and agriculture in Africa, that how can we begin to use social innovation? Because if we need innovators, how do we piece together society, innovation, technology, everything, begin to use everything so that we can have a better next generation? If you could move to the, yes, move to the slides with the need for architect, yes. Perfect, yes. Yes, we can move to the next one. Thank you. Now, if you look at this, we began to realize that, no, we will need to raise up a lot of social entrepreneurs. And a lot of social entrepreneurs, basically, social entrepreneurship, it's something that you know. It is a practice of developing innovative solutions to social and environmental challenges by using principles of business. Unlike traditional entrepreneurship, which focus on profit alone, social entrepreneurship blends purpose with profit. It builds ventures that create sustainable, measurable impact in the lives of people and community. Now, one of the key characteristics of social entrepreneurs is that they are distinct in terms of their mindset and mission. They are mission driven. And I believe that spaces like the School of Succession is that they make sure that the people, the leaders that come out here, they're not just profit driven primarily, but they are very purpose driven and they are mission led. And so these entrepreneurs that comes out, they are mission driven and they use innovation. Now, one of the things about Gen Z is that innovation comes out naturally, easy for them. They can navigate a number of things. Now, somebody said, how do we make agriculture, I don't want to use the other word. How do we make agriculture wonderful for young people? And part of it is that they want to see somebody in agriculture who does not look primitive. Because the face of agriculture in our continent, it's an old man or an old mother who is struggling and who is really, and that is how this has been branded. And so now, when somebody comes like me, who's handsome, and who's handsome and who's speaking good English, and all of that, now things change. And then I begin to show them, by the way, we have an app where you can actually go and do micro-learning courses about basic and agri. Just go online and download the app. Now it starts to change. By the way, you don't have to worry. Just get on the webinar We can run through the process and do everything, and we'll show you what to do. Just do it there, and then if you have a problem, you just SMS us. We've got a chat box that will respond to you and tell you, you know what, I think for you to grow that lettuce, you need a 12-week program, and this is what you must do every day. On Monday, this is what you must do. On Tuesday, this is what you must do, and this and this and this. And guess what? Now you have a group of 50 people that are growing crops in their homes, in their backyards. They don't need anybody to come there. You got a problem. There's an app. Go and scan the crop, and it will tell you what's wrong. Why is it yellow? Why is it like it lacks this kind of nutrient? How can you bring that nutrient naturally? Go and take this in your home, mix this and this and this, and come and dress it like this. You'll be fine. And within the 12-week cycle, they are harvesting, and they actually have got some nice lettuce and basil. Do you get what I'm saying? And this generation can handle that. But if you're going to present agriculture as a man on the tractor, a man on the tractor, in the heat, sun is hot, and they are working the land there. Now then, that's when you find that they don't want to participate there because they feel like, we love the technology. This is not our space. But I know people who are into technology, engineering, who are participating there, and because they are now control environment growing, greenhouses and hydroponics and many things that can now begin to be integrated, that you don't even have to be there to actually watch that, because the infrastructure now has changed. The technology has changed now, that there's usages of many other things to make sure that happen. So my daughter, who's 13 years old, she takes care of our garden. She's 13. That's a garden. Her heart was that she wanted to make sure that she could provide seedlings. So she nurses them from seeds. She germinates them. She tests them to make sure she checks the health of that. If this can be resistant in certain areas and 13 years. Why are we doing that? It's because the strength of our continent, it is not IT. It is agriculture. We can go anywhere. The technology is a tool that we can use to make sure that our yields are better. We can use that to make sure that, how do we make sure our water is properly? And all of that is properly. But we need to connect back into that. I believe that each and every continent has a prophetic destiny. The Middle East has got its own prophetic destiny. Asia, I believe Africa has got its own prophetic destiny. And part of praying intercessory and all is that we must connect with the prophetic destiny of our continent, so that we know that we must build storehouses for nation. Then from there, we then participate, all of us, because it needs a banker, it needs a technology person, it needs a wellness family person, because these are people. They go to, it needs everybody, but we are moving towards a future that is clear, that is totally clear. And so today we are here where we are, where we find ourselves, where we've got, next slide, where we got communities, people that sleep without eating in Africa. Just here, people sleep without eating. A food basket continent. And so why? It's because we don't have the people that can take a lead as entrepreneurs, as social entrepreneurs, who says, let's organize this community, make sure it's active. And so social entrepreneurship is critical in our continent. It will reduce poverty reduction. It will deal with some of the issues of gender equity, because, when we equip women farmers, make sure the land and inputs and markets are there, you begin to see that. When I was in Rwanda, one of the stories in Rwanda was that how they dealt also with some of the issues of genocide that happened in terms of reconciliation. They use a process called the Gachacha process, and they made victim and offender work together, work land together. and it facilitates some sort of reconciliation and conversation. So because, and it ensured that there was transition. So I have friends and communities there, and there's a community also of coffee growers that are there that I've been literally conversating with regards to their coffee. But the land can bring people together, and it can facilitate so much healing and so much, especially even among women and among so much. And environment, social entrepreneurs can promote these climate-smart regenerative farming because you do not need so much land to actually farm. You actually need just your backyard. And sometimes just a couple of square meters that is managed properly. And so entrepreneurs, because they are used to running businesses, they know how to use less resources to make sure there is enough productivity. They are able then to bring the skill in the community and talk to the people and say, you can do so much with this space and you can achieve more. I'll tell you also some good stories of what's happening at this point right now so that you can be encouraged also as you go out. Youth employment. Yes, jobs are still important, but they should not be the destination. They should be part of the journey towards getting to a certain destination. We can develop economies. Now, the next slide, I want to give you just an example in terms of, if you look at, people often think, no, I can't do agriculture. I've got land, but I don't have a tractor. Now, there's some stories on the next slide. There's some stories like, say, Nigeria. You've got what we call, especially for people who are technology-wise, you got like what we call Hello Tractor. So Hello Tractor is like a platform or something where it connects the tractor owner with the smallholder farmer using a mobile app, like a Uber for tractors. I need a tractor. I request. Make sense? Then, because this is where it's so important. So you got like something like an Uber tractor. And then in South Africa, you've got agri-protein, which converts organic waste into animal feed using black soldier flies, addressing food waste and input. And also for some, perhaps years, I spent time in the waste business, whereby we were growing worms, the earthworms. And the earthworms, we were growing them because we wanted to deal with waste. We wanted to deal with waste, food waste, and make sure that the earthworms, they make sure it decomposes, but in turn produces compost, which we eventually will then separate the medium from the worms and have this wonderful vermicompost that we could package into nice buckets and take it to a market. And we took it to the lab and it came out very good. And so the farmers wanted it, the nurseries wanted it. But it was addressing a food waste problem. And that was an innovation. I didn't have to sit on a tractor. I wasn't sitting on a tractor. I had a system in the house that was managing food waste so that I could go sell the compost to them. And so in Ghana, you have the She Farm, which means it empowers women farmers with digital record keeping, microloans, and agronomic trainings. And all of this is to help to make sure that you are able to kind of like, the entrepreneurs, they can combine their impact and scale and sustainability. So in Africa, we don't lack the fact that we cannot grow stuff. In fact, most African countries can plant, can grow. People can plant, they can grow. But one of the things has been, can we see this as a real market? That we can really scale it up and grow it without really feeling that we can't. Yes. Now, I want you to rush to the slides after this. Yes. Now, these slides, I want to emphasize it, especially on the church. That, you see, we're going to have to train up these guys. I have a long presentation, but I want to just cut it short by really saying we have to be intentional as a church to raise up these social entrepreneurs in a manner that we are like raising up cell group leaders. So someone said Jesus came on earth and died on the cross not to raise cell group leaders, but kingdom leaders. So which means kingdom leaders, there is impact that cuts across not just the cell group. The cell group can be a structure, a tool that can ensure continuous fellowship. But the goal is beyond the cell group. So which means that the focus we put in doing that, we must actually be intentional now in saying, just like in the book of Acts, when the number of the people who were being fed started, increasing, and people were complaining about the distribution, and there had to be a decision to say, we cannot focus on this, but let the community select people who will rise up to the challenge. And the people who were actually leading there, they were mostly entrepreneurial people who had a heart for the society. Now, if you look at the profile of people like Philip, people like Stephen, most of them, these were marketplace leaders who had a heart for society. And they had the ability to inspire these people. They had the ability to ideate. They had the ability to really do a lot of the things which means they had run that. And even Jesus, when he chose his disciple, by the way, they were, if probably today, they will be among this generation. The oldest from, I think scholars can correct me, the oldest was probably Peter. But most of the other gentlemen, I don't think, Pastor, I don't think they were eligible to even pay tax. I think it was Peter and Jesus. They were probably could pay tax. The rest were pretty much younger. So, we're talking about that. That was a 30-year and then below. So this is like below that. So which means I'm way older. I'm in my 40s. So I'm way older than Jesus was at the time. So if I'm looking like this in my 40s, I'm trying to figure out, how did Jesus look like? Because we sometimes talk about Jesus like, he's this grown man, was this father. But if you really understand the resistance even from the Pharisees, some of the resistance probably from the Pharisees was like, hey, what's this light saying? Just think about it. These are some of the things, just like in our generation, what can they say? Because we don't come into that part that he was basically, probably would have had the structure, probably like me. I do a lot of my work also in the Middle East, in Israel. And as I was walking there, even in the streets of Jerusalem, and I was just asking myself that, I'm trying to think and visualize this, and I'm like, 30 years. What does 30 years look like? I look at 30 years, and I realized that I'm not 30. And I started thinking a lot and say, here is this Gen Z, and he's saying, repent, for the kingdom of God is at hand. And there's elders here, people who have studied the law, who are very well. Why do you think they take it? They don't take it lightly, because it's challenging the whole order of things. And that is why that we must not think that we would have actually recognized that was the Messiah. If it was us, we probably would have missed it also, because of the manner that the gift was packaged and the manner he was coming at in such a culture that was there. And so these are the stuff that we are going to be presented with within this generation. But I'm saying that we must be intentional about preparing them so that they can be the one who starts terrorizing the four horns that are holding this continent. Now, this continent, it is not a difficult continent to deal with, but it needs this generation. They are the one that can deal with it, and we must then begin to prepare and make sure that they have the right tools, the right support, and the right everything to be able to make sure that they bring in this message. You can move to the next slide. I got 6 minutes to go. The next one. Please move to the slide that's written Designing Sustainable Programs. Yes, you just keep going and then I'm going to wrap up, closing. Yes. Not sure if you could see that, but then the next one, startup. Yes. So we're going to just look at that slide and the one after that. And then you're going to move to the slides that's got the books. Now this has been one of what we using as we deal with some of the entrepreneurs. So just wrapping up now, here's what we then been doing. So what we've been doing is that we've been then going into these nations and starts to say, look, we can see you doing the farming, whether it's animals, it's crops, it's what. And then we ask questions such as, what is the long-term vision of what you're doing? What is the impact vision that you seek to achieve with what you are doing? And most of the time, a lot of the activity is isolated. You find that, no, we're just doing. It's just, and I think part of entrepreneurship is that it brings in that structure of, I'm doing what I'm doing, but here's the impact vision in the long term. And so we've been working with a couple of groups. So we meet a group and we ask those questions and we get them to sign up and get on the app so that they can learn some of the basic and be organized. And then from there we move them to a course we call social innovation, where we use what we call the theory of change, which means a theory of change is that for change to happen, it doesn't happen haphazardly. It must be managed. So which means that if we're facilitating change in the community, and I'm saying this word change, the Bible says that in Acts 1:8, you must wait in Jerusalem until you endured with power. And the word power there, I think Pastor can help me there. The word with power, it's a Greek word meaning dunamis, which means dynamic ability to facilitate change. Right. And so there's a spirit that comes upon us, and that's why we talk about we're going to change the world. But how? The big question is that how we're going to do that. And that's where now when we look at the different communities, we sometimes don't ask the right questions as to what needs to change here. We just want to come and say, Africa needs this. Give them this. But the truth is that each community has got things that they want to change. Maybe it's a crime. Maybe it's abuse. Maybe it's this and this. But how do we bring in agriculture to become one of the drivers for bringing that change? And so the way we've looked at agriculture now, from just crops, I can do the crops, I can do the livestock, but we've started saying, can God use this as a tool, as a vehicle to transform society? How can we come in there? Or if the issue is work, how do we then begin to sit down and say, what does an ideal community look like? How can agriculture become part of the strategy that gets used? And begin to sit down and say, what are the ideas that we can basically put together? And as we do that, we then establish, how do you want to see this community? And put vision and mission for the community. Most communities don't have people who help them cast a vision. Because when there's no vision, people perish. People go all over. And that's why, even sometimes when the men are not doing it, in Judges it says, life in the village ceased until Deborah rose. And so you need people that will put a vision and a vision of innovation to say, we're going to have this and this and this happening. But I found out that a lot of the people that actually are able to help to bring that innovation, it is the young people. So we've been training a number of young people in agri. I don't even know how many now, the numbers. And they're growing stuff. And they're growing in their homes. We've got a training, I think there's books on the backyard gardens, on communities, on what, where they are growing different crops. So if 50 of them are growing these different crops, guess what? After 12 weeks, you are able to just aggregate all of that, not into some storehouse that's physical, aggregate it already there could be a store online that already, there's people who want that stuff. By the time it's aggregated, it's already got its market. We hear people cry about market. It's already there, and by the time it's gone there is actually an economy that is running. They're running it from their backyard, and they do not have to be, but they're still participating in their schooling, in their what. But the moral is that this generation can participate in many things, but one of them is that, please, I beg you, participate in anything that involves land, because that is the strength of this continent. We have a prophetic destiny to build storehouses, to feed the nation. And if we do not do that, whoever feeds us will control us. And when that happens, we will not have a choice and an option. And so the last slides, my time is up. The time is up. The last slides with the books. Now, the reason I don't finish my presentation, I have so much to say. But I will make this presentation available and all that. So now, I have written over 100 books. And these are the books in agriculture which, because of this conversation and to say that Africa is rich with so much wisdom and so much, I strongly believe that Africa right now is positioned as one of the strategic continents that will really resource many, many nations. And we need to pride ourselves as we are here that we are that seed and we are that fruit that will go out there and begin to build differently because of that. And I want to thank you for this time. I want to thank you for everything. And I will leave the slides and the notes, and I will leave also the website details, because there is just so much that when Pastor Shellen asked, I was like, Pastor Shellen, there's so much to actually share. And lots of those things, I put them in the books, because then it becomes easy for them to be transferable to the next generation. But thank you very much. And remember here, as you are here, you are those 4 craftsmen that must terrorize the powers that be that are existing. Thank you very much.